I am Dequitem, an armored fighter and filmer of non-choreographed night fights. And today we want to do a special video. We want to talk about traveling as a knight or traveling in armor as a man at arms. To be a knight means that you own a title, something that only a nobleman can achieve. So something that I will never achieve. I can only be a man at arms in fully armor, a fighter in armor. So owning the title of a knight means much more than being trained since childhood to fight in armor. It means so many different parts in history, and it changed from time to time. So there are times where being a knight and having the title to be a knight also means that you possibly own some land, owning a castle. Or sometimes it doesn't have to be that way. There are knights that lived in houses. There are knights that fight for other and travel through the land. But they normally never traveled as hedged knights. So, as a knight, you definitely has some horses and a tent, even on a campaign, and someone who helps you with all the gear you need to fight in armor. I have a lot of experience with traveling in armor, traveling without horses, without any help, and on top of that, a lot of camera equipment to make my short films at very hard to reach locations. So I want to share with you some of my experiences and what does it mean in history to travel as a man at arms in armor with all the needed gear. The tent behind me is a spoke wheel tent or spoke tent. And this is a historical fitting late medieval tent for knights. Of course, for a knightly spoke tent or spoke wheel tent, this would be colorful and painted in different beautiful decorations as well. But for me, I want to keep it simple because I'm not a knight. So I ordered this tent a couple of months ago from Matools PL, and it's awesome. It's absolutely perfect, and for that reason I will post a link in the video description because I can definitely recommend their tents. So this tent is fully made out of linen, and they call it on their shops umbrella tents. But I'm not sure about the terminology umbrella tents. I knew them as spoke or spoke wheel tents. These tents are great because you can storage stuff in it pretty nicely and you can dry stuff. If you ever wear armor, it's very hot inside and very sweaty. And therefore you need to dry them a lot. If you are only a common soldier, someone who doesn't own a horse and therefore only use upper body armor, so no leg armor because he has to walk by himself. Such a common soldier doesn't own a tent at all. He sleeps, in the dirt, in the rain. Maybe he uses a tarp to protect himself from all kinds of weather. But in the end, he doesn't take a full tent with him. So This behind me is something for a knight, but I'm not a knight. I often call myself a man-at-arms, someone in full armor. But to be a man-at-arms and to get paid as a man-at-arms in medieval times, you technically need a horse. Not only to fight on battlefield on horseback, but also for the logistic parts. Having a horse gives you a huge tactical advantage on the battlefield. Yes, most battlefields were not only two armies aligned to each other, running in front of each other and trying to kill each other. That's not how battlefields, even in medieval times, were common. Outflanking the opponent and preparing the battlefield was a huge part even in medieval times. So of course a horse can give you a huge advantage to get in the right positions before the attack. And for that reason, a lot of foot soldiers on the battlefield had horses at the beginning. So even a lot of archers and crossbowmen owned horses, but they didn't decide to use the horse on the battlefield in fighting. But they often used the horse to get to the locations. And of course, for the traveling parts on the campaign. Even knights often decided to dismount from their horses on battlefield to reinforce or command the lines of foot soldiers. The English knights of the second half of the 14th century and the first half of the 15th century used dismounting from horseback and fighting on foot in a battlefield as the common strategy. But of course, a knight nearly always traveled on horseback. And depending on how close you are to the enemy on your campaign, you are riding in full armor. But most of the time not with a helmet or an open visor of your helmet, and many times without gauntlets. But if you don't wear your armor on your own, you can of course storage them in big wagons, where your tents will be. Italian sources tell you to put your armor into wicker baskets, because wicker baskets are of course a lot lighter than heavy reinforced oak chests. But of course, if you are traveling on your campaign and getting closer to your opponents, it makes a lot more sense to already wear your armor on horseback. Because you need around 10 minutes to armor up fully. And 10 minutes isn't the time you always have to get ready for an attack. But if you are traveling fast without a wagon to transport your medieval tent, you have the option to put saddlebags onto your medieval saddles. Medieval saddles are very enclosed to your hips and hold you in place as a knight. So it's very, very hard to dismount a knight with a lance or anything else. If you are looking into the medieval sources of military logistics and packing lists, you will not find a lot of equipment for the common soldiers. Of course, they will mention a lot about the arms and armor. So, how well equipped a common soldier was. So, for example, if they had a helmet, gauntlets, a chest plate, some mail, and so on. But they don't talk a lot about carrying water. The sources only tell you to make a rest or build your camp near a stream or pond. They often didn't even thought about traveling with enough food, because they know they were able to requisition supplies from local farmers in the enemy territory. Only if you are traveling in your own locations, it makes a lot of sense to think about how to feed your own soldiers without exploiting your own local farmers. Therefore, it was a common strategy to station your own hired mercenaries in the enemy territory before you even need them for the actual campaign. Did hedge knights ever existed? Possibly not. Yes, there may be a few occasions where a knight slept under a tree or a hedge, but in normal circumstances, a knight on a campaign or on a tournament always owns a tent. You need a tent to maintain armor. After the use of armor on a battlefield or in a tournament, or if it's raining, the chances are high that your armor can rust, and therefore you have to care for your armor. And that's very hard without a roof on top of you. So a tent is really necessary for a knight. Same goes for the common soldiers as well. They have, of course, also a few armor parts, but it's much easier to take care for a few armor parts in rain than for a whole armor set that is very hard to storage. And as a common soldier, you have to weigh up if it's possible for you to transport such a big tent. And therefore, it makes much more sense to requisition barn after barn from local farmers. And if there is no barn, you sleep in the dirt, like a hedge knight. But the hedge knight from the story of the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms isn't based on historical knights. Knights on a campaign nearly always had a tent like this spoke wheel tent. So check out the link in the video description, and thanks for watching. Stay safe and don't kill your training partners. Bye bye.